Welkom bij INNOVERV Unplugged, de Nederlandse editie. If there's a time to discuss about transformation, the time is now. Think about what happened the past few years. Post-pandemic, geopolitical tension, war in Europe, this impacting the Netherlands in such a profound way. We are trading nations. We're dependent on export and import. We are also leading in green energy. We are also logistical and supply chain hub in Europe. So, what we will discuss and unpack today. The question is, how do we put big transformation bet when uncertainty around us is given? This is not a theoretical conversation. This is 100 to 300 million decision making. This is a board level discussions and impacting reputations of companies. Are you ready? We are. Laten wij beginnen. Welcome to the first episode of INNOVERV Unplugged, Nederlandse editie. Today, I've got the pleasure of two of our guests, Frank Gelen and Sander van Dam, and we will be led by our moderator, my colleague, Abby Connell. Abby?
Thank you, Adri. So Frank, we'll start with you. You've got years of experience working alongside CFOs, and you've been in front of many supervisory boards. So let's think. On the table, you've got a 200 million euro ERP transformation and operating model alongside. Given the markets are volatile, regulations are rising, and AI is moving faster than governance itself, what do? Do you move forward with the transformation or do you pause?
Well, I would say, if I'm honest, then probably the reaction of boards at the moment is to pause. You know, there's so much uncertainty that the natural reaction, on the one hand, is let's delay a little bit, let's see what's happening, let's wait till the uncertainty has gone. But they also know that cannot be the lasting solution. So ultimately, I think boards are also looking for the longer term solution. How do we use this momentum where we maybe not heavily invest, but where we can fix so many basics? We need to prepare the organization for the next change. And one thing I think to really use this moment for is to fix so many basics, your processes, your data, your culture maybe even, and make your organization agile. And you do that also by changing your technology. So you see many companies and boards at this moment, I think, looking like, hey, how can we improve our reporting? How can we improve cash flow? How can we stabilize our systems? How can we do all these things that you normally would also do? But probably now is really a good time to make sure that your organization is much better in shape.
Maybe to add to that, because I agree with you, right? Probably people would decide to pause. But if you look at today, if you look at the information requirements they currently have, many systems today are not capable of producing that. So also, yes, pausing is probably the decision, but also the fact that you don't have the information on your hands to make your decisions today, in many cases, is a reason to actually move forward.
Now, I'm fully with you, Sander. That is what organizations need. You know, you need to be, managing your business like, I'm always saying, like pilots fly a plane. So you need to increase the trust and reliability of your systems, of your data. And that is not what is, let's say, where we are at the moment. So companies need to be investing to make sure that for example, your information supply is so much more reliable.
So the way I see it, if I can play back what you said, in these uncertain times, it's not that the board is allergic to transformations. But what I see is actually, and what I heard actually, the board is allergic to business transformations being sugar-coated as a mere technical upgrade or a system upgrade. Would that be a fair understanding?
Absolutely, I think, Adri. So I would simply say only a technology upgrade. Okay, it might be necessary to do it every now and then, but ultimately, it is about designing your company for the future, and meaning that you make it more agile, that you can use it like a speedboat in the water, not like a tanker. You know, we all know big organizations they need to change. And I think that's what you also can smell in boards. So on the one hand, they really want to embrace new technologies. They want to think longer term. At the same time, of course, you need to fix the short-term problems. Right? So you typically see, I think, that management boards look a little bit more to the shorter term, which is important, but the supervisory board, the non-executives, are actually intended to have a much more longer-term focus. You need to bring those together, I think.
Yeah, I would avoid to call this a system upgrade, right? I think that's a danger because it's not a technical exercise. It's also not just a financial exercise. It's really a business exercise with business rationale and benefits that you need to make sure you really keep your eye on. So I would really avoid calling this a business update or a system update. It's really a transformation that changes the business, and you need to think about the business rationale and the business benefits when you decide that type of program. And it's not a technical upgrade. That's just not the thing, right? It's really a structural change to your organization in order to really be more agile and be able to act in a more volatile environment. You need to be faster.
And that's also, if I may, that's also where you see that, let's say, in the good old times, you did the one program, you start it, you finalize it, then you start another project. It's more sequential. But I think now you see the one change has not even ended before you have to adopt another change. So it's waves of change that are overlapping, interreacting, and how do you deal with it? How do you prioritize? Where do you put your people? How do you make sure that you finalize all these changes in a proper way? And you see that the enthusiasm at the beginning is great. Everybody starts, super. But then somewhere in the middle, it starts to deviate a little bit, and before you know it, you are jumping on another change. And that's where you do not end your change. And as a result, you will probably not reap the full benefits out of these changes. I'm not sure what your experience is.
Yeah, no, I think two elements there. It's really changing our rapidly following. Think about COVID. Think about change in the administration in the U.S. Trump, right? Tariffs, war in Ukraine. All geopolitical environment is changing. So you need to be able to adapt quicker. So it is a continuum. At the same time, I think it's important that you really define what the benefits are and really also keep track of them. It's not that if your system upgrade is done that you can tick the box. No, it's really what is you're changing your operating, the way your operating model needs to be properly defined. And also even beyond the life going of the system, you really need to make sure you plan. But yes, it's a continuum. It's not a project that's done. No, it actually will continue. For my own experience is that I started a project in, say, it's 3 years. It's not going to be 3 years. It's going to be probably longer, and it's probably ongoing, right? And you're going from one phase to another phase, and some phases are not planned.
Thank you. Okay, so given all of that, if you throw in uncertainty, Frank, what happens in organizations with large, complex landscapes when you add a level of uncertainty with these big programs?
Yeah. Well, I would say the level of tension is a bit increasing, you can say. Nobody likes uncertainty, so again, it will potentially pause big decisions. On the other hand, I think boards are also used to deal with it. So again, you need to look at shorter term versus longer term, but you also need to make sure, where do we still invest in? How do we prepare the organization for the future? How do we, at the same time, I think, let's be honest, how do we reduce the cost base? How do we simplify the business? All these kind of things is what I see companies and boards doing at this moment. Depends a little bit industry by industry, country by country, but overarchingly, I think that is what you see companies doing. But be careful to be too generalistic. There's industries that are heavily growing, investing, technology, the defense industry now, even the government. So you may like it or not, but it is not one size fits all. So you need to also adapt here. So we are used to a much more stable economy, stable way of working. But I think increasingly geopolitics plays a really important role on how you frame and build your organization, more than before.
But to manage this uncertainty, I think there's two elements that, in my experience, play a role. First of all is control and governance. That's going to be an important element for boards to control this project. At the same time, controls can slow you down, right? If you have too much governance, it's going to take forever to get things done. So you don't want that. So you need to properly balance that. And the other element is agility and speed. Agility is important for the team to be able to make decisions. You want to make fast decisions. You want to be agile. in order to make progress and to move forward with proper controls. You need to balance the two. If you have too much agility, too much speed, you go too fast, the risk increase of the program. So you need to balance that. And the transformation leader is really the responsible person or role to really balance control and agility. Those are things that you need to manage. And it's different from cultural elements as well. Some organizations want to go faster, some organizations slower, that's all fine. But you need to make sure you balance to your culture, what is the governance, the proper control around the program, and how fast do I go? And I remember talking to boards or committees, oh, we want to go fast, right? This project really has to take 7 years. We can do this in 2 years. Now, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and it needs to be properly managed. And also, the change management aspect of that is a very important element as well.
Really interesting, because you mentioned here about what the board expects, right? I think we are Dutch. In general, Dutch board is a bit more careful. They are not really into hype or something that is really being defined by vendors, etc. On my conversation with the boards, the way they see it is actually what is the North Star of the organizations? Where does the organization would like to go? What defines the organizations? To achieve that North Star, what is the capabilities, the future capabilities that the organization need to be built upon? And the third one is actually the integrations layers and the enablement layer by technology. So if you look about it, actually technology enable the future capabilities that organization would like to build to achieve the North Star that the board and the execs agree and defines. That's the way I see it. And specifically, Sander mentions about being agile, but at the same time also being well-governed control. This is two interplays that the board can place really well in any big transformations, multi-years, 100 million journey, that we need to ensure that the structure of the project is agile enough so it can adapt to uncertainties. We talk about black swans and etc. But at the same time, we need to govern this tightly enough so that it's not overspent and then we try to boil the ocean. So maintaining those two is really critical. What's your thought, Frank?
Yeah, you mentioned a few, I think, important topics, which is, I mean, Dutch boards. I'm not so sure if they are really different than boards in other countries, but the word that also Sander mentioned, I think, it's all about risk and how you manage risk. So I think many boards, Abby, also to your question, are trying to de-risk the organization, and you can do that in many things. And you were referring to how you manage the change, how you manage these large programs, and also there I think you see a tendency that boards are looking how to de-risk these big programs. Unfortunately, I think they are still perceived as very high risk, and we all know these stories where these programs overrun, too late, a lot of, well, the quality delivered is not always great. So I think there's a lot of fear. And fear is an important emotion, so boards are inclined to de-risk these programs. And how do they typically do that? But there's many ways you can do it, but I think it's always about, you need to, before you really start touching the system, you need this so-called phase zero, or you need to really prepare yourself well.
Yes.
And you mentioned it already a little bit, your operating model, your data model, your master data, your process. Well, there's many things. Yeah. But I've seen so many companies who start with a big ERP implementation and they not even know how their P&L structure looks like. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you need to make a decision there. Otherwise, you can never design, even from a template, these kind of systems. So I mean, that is one thing. There's many lessons learned here. You need a good business case, but don't be too hung up on it. Yeah. So it's not only about the money value that is coming out of it. So you simply need to set it up for success in many different ways. You need to bring in the right people, because we all know in the end you need to bring your best people to this change, and not the B or C quality or whatever. That is also not the way to do it. Anyway, there's many lessons we can talk about it for ages. I think, Sander, but
I think there's one other element that I think is important for the board. If you think about this transformation, you have to really explain properly to the organization why you're doing this and what the benefits is. For example, what I noticed in my career was sometimes that people would say, well, do we really need to change anything, right? And what's the reason for change? And then I always compare it to like we are the Dutch, right, in the Netherlands, so people walk on wooden shoes. That's perfectly fine to walk on the farm on wooden shoes. But if you have to run, you don't need wooden shoes. You need something else. And I think what I see in these transformations, that sometimes it's especially important that the board really understands that and helps the organization to understand, to manage through. Because if you don't understand that, project is going to be very difficult, right? And change will not really lead to the things that you actually need. And that's an important element. It's part of change management, I would say, that the organization not necessarily always feels the importance of something to change because it's already working today, so why change it? Well, because you have to be faster, because we're missing information, because it's competitive advantage that we need to acquire. Those things are important to make sure you tell that story, so everybody understands in the organization, not only finance, but sales and procurement, they all need to understand why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And you make me smile a little bit because I think one of the Dutch diseases that we sometimes suffer from, if I may say so, is that companies based in the Netherlands, it's a little bit in the culture, the DNA of the Netherlands, is that we are making these change programs too democratic.
Yes.
And by doing that, involving too many people and allowing too much freedom, almost. So it's really important to take all the people along. Without that, you can forget it. But on the other hand, making it too democratic will slow down the process, probably give a suboptimal outcome. So you need to carefully, I think, balance how you design the program, how you manage it. But I would not recommend to make it overly democratic. That is going to take a long time.
True.
So we've talked about the organisation being convinced and change management from the board side, but if you think the execs themselves, given its high risk, Adri, what makes them lean in rather than hesitate? So we've said it's high risk for the execs themselves, and we've said, okay, the board needs to go out to the business, but from what makes them lean in rather than hesitate? So they don't buy narratives on headlines and roadmaps. If the story is ECC is running out, support is ending.
You're not going to win the battle with that, right? So an ECC is running out. You really have to tell the story is that why do you need to change and what's the benefit for the business? And you have to have the executives behind it, because if they're not behind it, it's going to be an uphill battle, right? And you're never going to get there. So the executives, it's important to really make sure they're convinced that the change or the business transformation that you're going through will actually deliver the benefits that you expect. And you really have to properly define it. For instance, like your future operating model, right? What is it? Can you do it with less people? Or where do you put which responsibility? What's the information? You spoke about the data, right? What is the data that we need in order to make decisions? You really have to have that discussion with the leadership, and they have to stand behind it. Because the first thing that something goes wrong, the organization will complain to the leadership, and they will come to you and say, hey, I don't understand what you're doing, right? What's the purpose here, right? You really have to have clarity around that.
I would say the executives are way too afraid to start these programs. And that's a pity, because I tell you, if you do well, it's a very inspiring journey in which you can take people along, you can build the company of the future, you can take all these people along, so it's really inspiring, but you need to do it well. So all these things that you mentioned, you need to slice it well. Don't be afraid, It's not about technology, it is about the future design, the future way of working of your company. So I would also say, let's make it a fun ride. There will be some ups and downs, but in general, this can really be a very rewarding program. So you always need to manage it a little bit, high quality and scope, we all know that. But it's not that difficult if you set it up for success, including the right sense of urgency, because if that's not there, you already make a false start.
And if I may add to that, Frank, I think you mentioned about this is actually worth to go into, because you define the future state of the enterprise, right? If I were in the board, I would like to know actually from the executive at least three things. First, what is actually the hard benefit versus the enabled benefit? The second part is what are the costs and the timeline related to this? And last but not least, I would like to have a sense of realism. Does the leadership knows exactly the risk of going full into this? and factor that in the business case. Because I think it's good that we would like to go a certain directions, but actually putting a certain realism and then make that collective decision together that we are doing this for enabling the enterprise to be ready for the next decades, super duper critical. These conversations between the board and the exec need to take place in an open and frank manner, the way I see it. Frank manner, yeah.
Well, yeah, frank manner indeed. But now I would say what I before starting these journeys, I think boards are asking themselves basically three things. So the first is always why and why now.
Yeah.
So you need to find the right timing, right momentum. There might be other big issues that play a big role, acquisitions, disposal, whatever. So you need to first and foremost be able to answer that one. I think secondly, it's always about the people. So who?
Yeah.
Do we have the right, making sure that you get all the stakeholders aligned?
Right.
That is, I think, all key ingredients. If you can have tick these three boxes off, then you are maybe ready to go.
Yeah. I think going back to what Abby asked just now, whether this large transformations in a volatile environment would make the boards more lean in or pause a little bit. You just touched the really important core there about we need to make sure that yes, it is comprehensive end to end, but at the same time you make it into chunk that is digestible, because nobody knows next year whether a new tariffs will be introduced or a new divestment or mergers will happen. So a multi-year journey like this, if you put it into a chunk that is digestible for the board executive, it makes it's easier for the board also to lean in, because it makes it a bit more modular. It's not like a big thing that they need to swallow in one go, right?
That is absolutely true, and it makes it also less risky, I would say.
The risk, yeah.
Back to my earlier point. I think maybe the other element, but also keen to have your view, Sander, is like, I mean, sometimes you need to do it in one go. So speed, deadlines, how do you manage it in the most efficient way? And I would argue that most companies are not even choosing the most efficient way to do it, maybe. But again, slice it, dice it, do it step by step, and also bring in different people. So you need to change the team, you need to maybe change the consultant, you need to change course of direction. And now you see a big trend with AI that everybody wants to know. So how do we bring AI into that journey? It's not only a big ERP implementation, but how do we use the latest technology to make it even more efficient, maybe better outcomes? I think that's really exciting. Yeah? So
that's for episode 3, by the way. So
yeah,
stay tuned for episode 3. Sander,
So
your thoughts?
I'll pause my comment for episode 3. No, but just to respond on what Frank said, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I would say if you do a big project, right, and you spend a lot of money, my personal belief is that if you cut it in 10 pieces and do it over a long period of time, you probably spend more money than that big project. You don't know. So it's really to the 3 points that you mentioned. It's important that you have the confidence as a board that you can successfully complete these projects. In the end, will go always different than you expected, but you should have the ability to adapt and adjust to it. I think it really also comes down to really define the benefits properly, right? And it is not only savings, right? Wherever, if it's more efficient, definitely it's an element. I always say there are definitely 10 other reasons that in the end will actually lead to savings. So for me, I always believe that if you do a proper system implementation of business transformation, you should always get in the position to lower costs in the end. But the more important part is, do you really get the right business information to make your decision in an agile way in a volatile environment? That's the most important. But I've seen programs where you see as purpose a reduction in system complexity, right? So the IT landscape needs to be reshaped because you have 20 ERP systems, you want to really reduce it to a few, right? Could be one. Retain talent could be important for your organization to be agile, and therefore your business process really has to be in an environment where you actually can attract talent. I can imagine if you say in finance, if you have to close and it takes you every month 7 days to close the books or 10 days to close the books, you don't want to work there. Right? You want to work in an organization that's 2 days, right? I'm just making it up. But those elements are important as well. There's human capital to it, right? There's infrastructure to it, and there's definitely savings and business information. Data, you mentioned data. Also, organizations are really not necessarily well organized around data, and that in itself is an element to look at as well to make sure you have a successful migration.
Okay, that's the end of episode 1. Please join us for episode 2 as we talk about the difficulties of ERP transformations.